Picture this scenario. You're staring at your investment account showing $200,000 and feeling pretty good about yourself. You've worked hard, saved diligently, and finally hit what feels like real money. But then your financially savvy friend drops a bomb that shatters everything you thought you knew about wealth building. She tells you that your $200,000 isn't just 20% of the way to becoming a millionaire, it's actually halfway there. Not halfway in terms of dollars, but halfway in terms of time. Your brain immediately rejects this as impossible because the math doesn't add up. But what if I told you that this seemingly crazy statement reveals the most powerful wealth building secret that 99% of people never understand, and why most folks give up right before the magic happens? My name is Alex, and I spend way too much time analyzing the hidden mathematics of wealth building and why people who understand compound growth become millionaires while people who think linearly stay broke forever. If you're someone who's been saving and investing but feels like you're moving at a snail's pace toward real wealth, or if you've ever wondered why the rich seem to get richer at an accelerating pace, make sure to hit that subscribe button and give this video a thumbs up, because today we're diving into the time travel mathematics that will completely change how you think about every dollar you save. Here's the thing that absolutely blows my mind about how people think about money. We're hardwired to think linearly, which means we assume that building wealth happens in equal increments over equal periods of time. We think that if it takes 12 years to save the first $100,000, it should take another 12 years to get to 200,000, and another 12 years after that to reach 300,000. But compound interest doesn't work linearly. It works exponentially, which means the rules of the game completely change once you understand the mathematics of momentum. Let me show you exactly what I mean with numbers that will probably make you question everything you thought you knew about wealth building. If you start with $0 and invest $500 per month, earning a 7% annual return, it takes approximately 12 years to reach your first $100,000. 12 long years of disciplined saving and investing while watching your balance crawl forward month after month. But here's where it gets interesting. That second $100,000, taking you from $100,000, doesn't take another 12 years. It takes approximately 6 years, half the time. And the third $100,000 from $200,000, that takes about 4 years. The fourth increment from $300,000 takes roughly 3 years. By the time you're adding the increment that takes you from $900,000 to $1 million, it happens in less than 18 months. This is why your $200,000 represents the halfway point to becoming a millionaire in terms of time, not money. When you hit $200,000, you're not 20% of the way there. You're 66% of the way there when measured by the only metric that actually matters, time. The psychological impact of understanding this cannot be overstated. Most people quit building wealth right around the $50,000 mark because they feel like they're making no progress. They look at their account balance and think, if it took me 8 years to save $80,000, it's going to take me another 92 years to become a millionaire. So they give up and start spending their money on lifestyle upgrades instead of continuing to invest. But they're quitting right before the exponential curve kicks in. They're walking away from the table just as the compound interest starts doing most of the heavy lifting. It's like training for a marathon for months, then dropping out at mile 20 when the finish line is finally in sight. This brings us to something that might fundamentally change how you think about your financial journey. The first $100,000 is by far the hardest money you'll ever accumulate. Not just because you're starting from zero, but because every dollar you save and invest is fighting against the mathematical reality of small numbers. When you have $1,000 invested and it grows by 7%, you make $7 that year. When you have $100,000 invested and it grows by 7%, you make $7,000 that year. Same percentage, but now your money is making more annually than many people save in their entire lives. This is the power of having a large base for compound interest to work on. Think about it this way. When you're starting out, you're doing all the work, you're the one contributing every dollar through your salary and discipline. But as your account balance grows, your money starts doing more and more of the work for you. Eventually, your investments are contributing more to your wealth than your salary is. This is the exact moment when you transition from being someone who works for money to someone whose money works for them. And this transition doesn't happen gradually. It happens suddenly. Usually somewhere around the $200,000 mark for most people. Let me paint you a picture of what this actually looks like in real life. Meet Sarah, who started investing $600 per month at age 25. For the first decade, watching her account balance felt like watching grass grow. $50,000, $100,000. The numbers crept up slowly, and she often wondered if she was wasting her time. But then something magical happened around year 12 when she hit $150,000. Her annual investment returns started matching her annual contributions. She was putting in $7,200 per year, but her investments were also growing by roughly $7,200 per year from compound interest. Suddenly, her wealth was doubling at the rate she expected. By year 15, when Sarah hit $200,000, her investment returns exceeded her contributions for the first time. She was still putting in $7,200 annually, but her money was making $14,000 annually. She was literally working part-time while her money worked full-time. By year 18, Sarah became a millionaire, not because she suddenly started making more money or because she discovered some secret investment strategy, simply because she understood that wealth building is a game of patience and exponential mathematics, not linear effort. But here's the crucial insight that most people miss. Sarah's journey wasn't about the money she saved, it was about the time she gave compound interest to work. Every year she invested was like planting a tree that would bear fruit for decades. The trees she planted in year 1 were massive by year 18. The trees she planted in year 10 were just hitting their stride, and the trees she planted in year 15 were still saplings but growing rapidly. This is why starting early matters so much, but it's also why continuing to invest matters even more. The people who build serious wealth aren't necessarily the ones who start earliest. They're the ones who never stop investing, especially during the middle years when progress feels slow. Now let's talk about why this exponential curve is invisible to most people, and why they make terrible decisions right before the breakthrough happens. Our brains evolved to think linearly because that's how most things in the physical world work. If you want to dig a hole twice as deep, it takes roughly twice as much work. If you want to run twice as far, it takes roughly twice as much time. But compound interest doesn't follow physical world rules. It follows mathematical rules, specifically exponential rules. And our brains are notoriously bad at understanding exponential growth until it's already happened. This is why most people underestimate the power of compound interest in the beginning and overestimate how much work they'll need to do in the middle. They think building wealth will be harder than it actually is once momentum kicks in, so they either never start or they quit too early. The classic example of this psychological blindness is the penny doubling thought experiment. If you had a penny that doubled every day for 30 days, how much would you have? Most people guess a few hundred or maybe a few $1,000s. The actual answer is $5.4 million. That's the power of exponential growth that our linear thinking brains can't intuitively grasp. Your wealth building follows the same mathematical principles as that penny. It starts painfully slow, stays frustratingly slow for longer than you expect, then suddenly explodes in ways that feel almost magical if you don't understand the underlying mathematics. This brings us to one of the most important psychological shifts you can make in your wealth building journey. You need to stop thinking about your net worth in terms of dollar amounts and start thinking about it in terms of time remaining until financial independence. When you have $50,000 invested, you're not only 5% of the way to $1 million, you're actually about 25% of the way there in terms of time. When you hit $100,000, you're not only 10% of the way there in dollars, you're 33% of the way there in time. When you reach $200,000, you're not only 20% of the way there in dollars, you're 66% of the way there in time. This reframing changes everything about how you feel during the wealth building process. Instead of feeling discouraged by how far you have to go, you start feeling encouraged by how much progress you've actually made when measured correctly. But here's where most financial advice gets this completely wrong. Traditional advice tells you to celebrate small milestones equally. Celebrate your first $10,000. Celebrate your first $50,000. Celebrate your first $100,000. But these milestones aren't equally important from a compound interest perspective. Your first $100,000 is the most important financial milestone you'll ever achieve. Not because $100,000 is a lot of money. It's not enough to retire on or dramatically change your lifestyle. It's important because it represents crossing the threshold where compound interest becomes a meaningful force in your wealth building. Once you have $100,000 working for you, you've created a money-making machine that will never stop working. Even if you never invested another dollar, that $100,000 would become $200,000 in 10 years, $400,000 in 20 years, and $800,000 in 30 years, just sitting there growing at 7% annually. But if you continue investing $500 per month on top of that foundation, the acceleration becomes breathtaking. The combination of your ongoing contributions plus the compound growth on an increasingly large base creates a wealth building momentum that feels almost effortless compared to those first difficult years. This is why people who understand exponential mathematics stay motivated during the slow years, while people who think linearly give up. When you understand that every dollar you invest today will double approximately every 10 years, you start thinking about money completely differently. A $500 restaurant dinner isn't just $500, it's $1,000 in 10 years, $2,000 in 20 years, and $4,000 in 30 years if you invested that money instead. When you're young and building wealth, every spending decision is actually an investment decision in disguise. But here's something that will really blow your mind about the time value of money. The dollars you invest in your 20s and 30s aren't just more valuable because they have more time to compound. They're more valuable because they benefit from the entire exponential curve. Let's say you invest $5,000 at age 25 and never touch it again. By age 65, at 7% annual returns, that $5,000 becomes approximately $150,000. But if you wait until age 45 to invest that same $5,000, it only becomes $30,000 by age 65. Same amount invested, same rate of return, but 20 years less time results in 5 times less money. This is why time is more valuable than money when it comes to building wealth. You can always make more money, but you can never make more time. Once a year passes without investing, that time is gone forever, along with all the compound growth it would have generated. Now let's address the elephant in the room that stops most people from taking advantage of this exponential mathematics. The first $100,000 feels impossible when you're starting from zero. The progress feels so slow that it's easy to convince yourself it's not worth the effort. This is where understanding the true timeline becomes crucial for maintaining motivation. You're not saving for 40 years to become a millionaire. You're saving for approximately 18 to 20 years to become a millionaire, with the hardest work happening in the first 10-12 years. Once you reframe the challenge correctly, it becomes much more manageable. Instead of thinking, I need to save money for 4 decades, you think, I need to build my first $100,000 as quickly as possible, then let compound interest do the heavy lifting. This shifts your strategy from trying to maintain perfect consistency for an impossibly long time to sprinting toward that first crucial milestone. You might work extra hours, take on side projects, or live more frugally than usual for 10-12 years to accelerate your path to $100,000. But once you reach that threshold, you can relax a bit because mathematics is now working in your favor. Here's where the psychology of exponential growth creates some counterintuitive behavior patterns that separate wealth builders from everyone else. Most people increase their spending as their income increases, which keeps them on the linear wealth building track forever. But people who understand exponential mathematics do the opposite. They live like they're broke during their highest earning years because they understand that every additional dollar invested during the exponential phase has massive long-term impact. An extra $200 per month invested when you already have $200,000 doesn't just add $200 to your monthly contributions, it accelerates your entire timeline to financial independence. This is why you'll often see people making $150,000 per year still driving 10-year-old cars and living in modest apartments, while people making $60,000 per year have new trucks and expensive hobbies. The high earners who understand exponential mathematics know that their current sacrifice is temporary, but the wealth they're building is permanent. Let me give you another real example of how this plays out. David started investing $400 per month at age 28 after reading about compound interest. For 8 years, he watched his balance slowly grow to about $60,000, and he was getting frustrated with the pace. At age 36, David got a promotion that increased his income by $30,000 per year. Instead of upgrading his lifestyle, he increased his monthly investments to $800 per month. This single decision accelerated his timeline to $100,000 by almost 3 years. By age 40, David had $120,000 invested. By age 44, he had $200,000. By age 47, he had $300,000. By age 50, he had $450,000. By age 53, David became a millionaire, all because he understood that the money he invested during his high-earning years would benefit from the maximum compound growth period. David's friends who got similar promotions at the same time bought bigger houses, nicer cars, and more expensive vacations. They're still working today while David retired at 53. Same starting point, same income trajectory, completely different understanding of exponential mathematics. This brings us to the most important practical application of this knowledge. If you're currently anywhere between $0 and $200,000 in invested wealth, your absolute top priority should be reaching that next major milestone as quickly as possible, not because the destination matters, but because time matters. Every month earlier that you reach $100,000 is worth years off your timeline to financial independence. Every month earlier that you reach $200,000 is worth even more years off that timeline. The mathematics are unforgiving. Time lost early in the process can never be recovered later. This means making some uncomfortable choices during your wealth-building years. It means saying no to lifestyle inflation even when you can afford it. It means driving used cars longer than you want to. It means taking vacations that cost $2,000 instead of $8,000. It means living below your means. Not forever, but just until compound interest can take over the heavy lifting. But here's the beautiful part about understanding this timeline. You're not sacrificing for 40 years. You're sacrificing for maybe 15 years, after which your money works harder than you do. Most people never make this trade-off because they don't understand what they're trading for. They think they're trading current enjoyment for the possibility of future wealth. But that's not accurate. They're actually trading current enjoyment for mathematical certainty of future wealth. And the timeline is much shorter than they realize. When you understand that reaching $200,000 puts you 2/3 of the way to becoming a millionaire in terms of time, every dollar you invest takes on different psychological weight. You're not just saving money, you're buying years of your life back. You're purchasing freedom from having to work for money. Let's talk about what this actually feels like when the exponential curve kicks in. People who've experienced it describe it as surreal. You stop checking your account balance obsessively because it's growing faster than you can psychologically process. Your investment returns start exceeding your salary, which feels like getting paid for doing nothing. The psychological shift from scarcity to abundance happens suddenly, usually around the $300,000 mark. You stop worrying about money, not because you have enough to spend carelessly, but because you have enough for mathematics to guarantee your future financial security, regardless of what you do with your career. This is when work becomes optional instead of necessary. Not because you have enough money to retire immediately, but because you have enough money to ensure you'll be able to retire on your own terms within a reasonable time frame, regardless of economic conditions, job market changes, or personal circumstances. But here's something that almost nobody talks about when they discuss compound interest. The exponential curve doesn't just apply to your money, it applies to your financial confidence and decision-making ability. Once you've seen exponential growth work in your favor, you start recognizing exponential opportunities in other areas of your life. You understand that skills compound exponentially, relationships compound exponentially, business opportunities compound exponentially. The same mathematical principles that govern money also govern most other forms of value creation. This is why people who build wealth through understanding compound interest often become successful in multiple areas of their lives. They're not just good with money, they're good at recognizing and leveraging exponential systems wherever they find them. So if you're sitting there with $50,000 or $100,000 or $150,000 feeling like you're moving too slowly toward financial independence, remember that you're much closer than you think. You're not measured by how far you have to go in dollars, you're measured by how much time you have left. When you hit $200,000, you're not 20% of the way to $1 million. You're on the doorstep of exponential wealth building where every year brings you dramatically closer to financial freedom. The question isn't whether compound interest will work, the mathematics guarantee it will. The question is whether you'll stick with it long enough to let the magic happen. If this video helped you understand why your current savings represent more progress than you realized, hit that subscribe button and let me know in the comments what milestone you're working toward and how this timeline perspective changes your motivation.